Take a slow breath in and let it fall out gently. There's a quiet question many Christians carry, but rarely say out loud. It sounds like this: why do I feel distant from God? Even though I still believe, even though I still pray, even though I still try. If you've ever asked that quietly in your heart, this episode is for you. Because what you're experiencing may not be what you think it is. There's a common assumption we're taught, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly, that closeness to God should always feel obvious, that His presence should always feel warm, that prayer should always feel alive, that faith should always feel emotionally connected. And when it doesn't, we quietly wonder if something is wrong with us. We wonder if our faith is weakening, if we've disappointed God, if we've drifted too far, if we're not doing enough, if we're missing something everyone else seems to have. But here's a truth that often comes as a surprise. Spiritual distance does not automatically mean spiritual failure. What if the distance you feel is not disobedience, not rebellion, not lack of faith, but something else entirely? What if it's not that God has stepped away, but that your soul has been protecting itself? What if your spirit hasn't grown cold, but quiet? What if this season isn't about losing faith, but about surviving something that required you to be strong? There are seasons in life when the soul narrows its focus, not because it wants to, but because it has to. Seasons where you carry responsibility. Seasons where you endure loss. Seasons where you stay functional, even when things inside you feel fragile. And in those seasons, your soul learns how to keep going, sometimes at the cost of sensitivity, sometimes at the cost of feeling, sometimes at the cost of emotional openness, not because you chose distance, but because survival demanded focus, and spiritual sensitivity often softens during survival. That doesn't mean God left. It means your soul adapted. It learned how to stay steady, how to endure, how to carry weight quietly. And now, as things begin to slow, you notice the silence, you notice the space, you notice the distance, and you wonder what it means. Let's name this gently. Feeling spiritually distant does not mean God is far. It does not mean your faith is broken. It does not mean you failed spiritually. It does not mean you missed something essential. Sometimes it means you've been strong longer than you realized. Sometimes it means you've been holding more than you acknowledged. Sometimes it means your soul has been in preservation mode, and God understands that. If God were disappointed in you, this moment wouldn't feel gentle. If God were distant, you wouldn't be drawn to listen right now. If your faith were gone, you wouldn't be asking these questions. The very ache you feel is not evidence of distance, it's evidence of desire. In this episode, we're going to talk about what spiritual distance really is, why it happens, and how God meets us in it without pressure or shame. We're not going to force closeness. We're not going to chase emotion. We're not going to manufacture connection. We're going to slow down and let intimacy rebuild quietly, the way God often works. Take another slow breath in and release it softly. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not forgotten. And this quiet place you're in may be exactly where God is waiting to meet you. There is a very specific kind of season that doesn't get talked about often in faith spaces. It's the season where your faith is still there, but your feelings are gone. You still believe in God. You still trust Him. You still know His word. You still show up in the ways you know how. But something feels muted. Prayer feels quiet. Worship feels flat. Scripture feels distant. And the emotional connection you once felt seems harder to reach. And because no one warned you about this season, you may have assumed something was wrong. But this experience is more common than you think. Faith and feelings are not the same thing. Faith is trust. Faith is orientation. Faith is choosing to lean toward God, even when your emotions don't respond. Feelings are responses. They rise and fall. They fluctuate with seasons, stress, grief, and responsibility. And sometimes your feelings go quiet, not because God has left, but because your soul is tired. There are seasons where life demands so much emotional output that there's very little left over. Seasons where you care for others. Seasons where you hold things together. Seasons where you don't have the luxury of falling apart. In those seasons, your emotional system conserves energy, not to shut God out, but to keep you functioning. And spiritual feelings, like any feelings, can soften during that time. That doesn't mean God is distant. It means your soul is protecting itself. This is where many people become confused. They say, I don't feel close to God, so I must be doing something wrong. But closeness to God is not measured by emotional intensity. There are moments of closeness that feel warm and alive. And there are moments of closeness that feel quiet and steady, just like any relationship. Think about someone you deeply trust. You don't always feel excitement around them. You don't always feel emotion. Sometimes you simply feel safe. Sometimes you don't feel anything dramatic at all, just a steady sense of presence. That doesn't mean the relationship is weak. It often means it's deep. The same is true with God. Some of the deepest spiritual seasons are not marked by strong emotion. They are marked by faithfulness, by consistency, by showing up quietly, by staying oriented toward God, even when nothing feels immediate. That kind of faith doesn't make noise, but it holds weight. If you've been feeling spiritually distant, ask yourself gently, have I been judging this season based on how it feels instead of how God sees me? Have I assumed distance because I don't feel intensity? Have I confused quiet with absence? God does not disappear when emotions fade. He does not withdraw when feelings go silent. He remains present, even when you don't sense Him. Sometimes especially then. In the next part, we're going to talk about why spiritual distance often gets misinterpreted as failure, and how that misunderstanding creates unnecessary shame. Take a slow breath in and let it out gently. You are not losing your faith. You are walking through a quieter place, and God is still with you here. There is a quiet weight that often settles into the heart when spiritual distance is misunderstood. That weight is shame. Not loud shame, not dramatic shame, but subtle shame. The kind that whispers quietly, I must not be doing enough. I must be missing something. I must have disappointed God. I must be farther away than I realize. And slowly, that shame creates even more distance, not because God pulls away, but because we do. Many people were taught, directly or indirectly, that closeness to God should always feel obvious, that if prayer feels dry, something is wrong, that if worship doesn't move you, your heart must be hardened, that if God feels quiet, you must have done something to cause it. So instead of bringing the quiet to God, we hide it. We push harder. We perform more. We try to fix ourselves spiritually, and shame quietly grows. But let's say this gently and clearly. Spiritual distance is not a moral failure. It is not proof that you've drifted away. It is not evidence of weak faith. It is not a sign that God is displeased. Often, it's simply a season of transition, a season of deepening, a season of quiet work beneath the surface. Shame makes us believe we must repair ourselves before we can approach God, but God does not require repair. Before relationship, He invites honesty, and honesty sounds like this. God, I feel quiet. God, I feel unsure. God, I don't feel close right now. God, I don't know why this feels different. That kind of prayer does not push God away. It draws Him closer. Think about this for a moment. If God only drew near, when you felt spiritually strong, He would not be a very safe God. But the God revealed in Scripture draws near to the weary, the confused, the uncertain, the quiet-hearted. He is not intimidated by your dryness. He is not disappointed by your honesty. He is not distant because you feel distant. Shame tells you to pull away until you fix it. Grace invites you to come closer as you are, and tonight you are choosing grace. Take a slow breath in and let it fall out gently if you've been carrying shame about your spiritual life, if you've been quietly judging yourself, if you've been afraid to name the distance. You can release that now. God already knows where you are, and He is not standing at a distance. With crossed arms, He is near, gentle and attentive. In the next part, we're going to explore something important. How seasons of survival can quiet spiritual sensitivity without severing spiritual connection. This is where many people finally understand themselves with compassion. Take another slow breath and stay here. You are not failing God. You are learning how grace works in quieter seasons. And let's talk now about something that explains so much of what you may be feeling. Survival. There are seasons in life where the soul shifts into survival mode. Not because you planned it, not because you chose it, but because circumstances demanded it. Seasons where you had to keep going. Seasons where stopping wasn't an option. Seasons where responsibility outweighed rest. Seasons where you carried pain quietly because there was no space to fall apart. In those seasons, your soul learns how to narrow its focus. It learns how to stay functional, how to stay steady, how to endure. And while that adaptation helps you survive, it can quietly reduce sensitivity. Not just emotional sensitivity, but spiritual sensitivity too. This is important to understand. When the soul is in survival mode, it prioritizes stability over sensation. It focuses on what is necessary, not what is expressive. It conserves energy. It limits vulnerability. It quiets what feels non-essential, so you can keep moving forward. And spiritual awareness, the felt sense of God's nearness, can soften during this time. Not because God withdraws, but because your soul is conserving. Think of it this way. If you were carrying something fragile, through a storm, you wouldn't hold it loosely. You'd grip it tightly. You'd protect it. You'd focus. Survival does the same thing to the soul. It doesn't abandon God. It holds on to Him quietly. Many people assume that if they don't feel God, they must have lost connection. But often, Connection is still there. It's just quieter, less expressive, less emotional, more internal, more like endurance than experience. This is why some of the strongest believers feel spiritually distant at times, not because their faith disappeared, but because it went underground. Roots grow in silence, and God often does his deepest work beneath awareness. If you've been through stress, loss, long-term responsibility, emotional strain, or seasons where you had to be the strong one, your soul may have shifted into survival without you realizing it. And now, as life slows even a little, you're noticing the quiet. Not because God is gone, but because your soul hasn't learned how to open back up yet. And that's okay. Opening happens gently. Take a slow breath in and let it out softly. Nothing about this means you failed spiritually. It means you adapted. And God understands adaptation. He does not rush restoration. He does not demand instant sensitivity. He meets you patiently, right where survival left you. In the next part, we're going to talk about something that brings relief, what it means when God feels quiet, and how his nearness is often deeper than our emotions can measure. Stay here. You are being understood, not corrected. Now let's talk about one of the most misunderstood experiences in the spiritual life. When God feels quiet. This is often the moment people begin to worry the most. They say, God used to feel close. I used to sense his presence. I used to hear him more clearly. And now it feels silent. And silence can be unsettling because we often associate God's nearness with what we can feel, what we can sense, what we can emotionally perceive. So when those sensations fade, we assume distance, but silence does not mean absence. There are relationships in your life where silence does not mean separation, moments where words are unnecessary, moments where presence is steady, even without conversation, moments where trust is deep enough, that constant reassurance isn't required. God's relationship with you can enter that kind of space, a quieter space, a steadier space, a deeper space. Not dramatic, not loud, but faithful. God often speaks loudly when we are beginning, but he often speaks softly as we grow, not because he is pulling away, but because he is drawing us closer. Closer to trust, closer to maturity, closer to rest. Sometimes God grows quiet, not to test you, not to punish you, not to withdraw, but to invite you into a faith that is not dependent on sensation, a faith that rests, even when feelings fade, a faith that remains, even when nothing feels dramatic. This kind of faith is not weaker, it is stronger, because it does not rely on emotional reinforcement. It rests in relationship. If God feels quiet right now, it may be because he trusts you to remain with him without needing constant affirmation. That is not distance, that is intimacy. Take a slow breath in and let it fall out gently. You are not abandoned. In this quiet place, you are not being ignored. God is not testing your loyalty. He is inviting you to experience him in a deeper way. In the next part, we're going to talk about the difference between intimacy and intensity, and why confusing the two often leads people to believe they are spiritually distant, when they are actually growing. Stay here. The quiet is not empty. It is full of God. Let's talk now about something that quietly shapes how many people measure their faith. The difference between intimacy and intensity. These two are often confused. Intensity is emotional. It's noticeable. It's powerful. It's the feeling of closeness. That comes with strong sensation. Intimacy is different. Intimacy is steady. It's quiet. It's relational. It's closeness that remains, even when emotion is low. And many people believe that when intensity fades, intimacy must be gone too. But that isn't how relationships work. Think about the relationships that matter most in your life. They are not intense all the time. They are not emotionally charged every day. They don't always feel exciting or dramatic. And yet, they are deeply intimate because intimacy is built on presence, on trust, on staying, on being known over time, not on constant emotional response. Many people experience intense closeness to God early in their faith. Everything feels alive. Prayer feels electric. Worship feels powerful. God feels close and unmistakable. But as faith matures, God often invites us into intimacy instead of intensity, a closeness that does not depend on emotional highs, a relationship that holds steady through quiet seasons. This transition can feel confusing if no one explains it, because intensity feels like proof and intimacy feels subtle. So when the emotional charge fades, people assume distance. But often, what's happening is growth. Here is a gentle truth that can feel surprising at first. Intensity fades, intimacy remains. Intensity is something you feel. Intimacy is something you live inside. And God is far more interested in building intimacy with you than keeping you emotionally stimulated. If your faith feels quieter now, if God feels less dramatic, if prayer feels simpler, if worship feels steadier, that may not be loss. It may be depth. It may be trust forming beneath awareness. It may be a relationship that no longer needs to prove itself through sensation. Take a slow breath in and let it fall out gently. You don't need to chase intensity to be close to God. You don't need to recreate old feelings. To be spiritually alive, you don't need emotional confirmation. To be deeply connected, intimacy with God is often felt more in steadiness than in sensation. In the next part, we're going to release the pressure to feel close to God and talk about what happens when you stop performing closeness and start resting in presence. Stay here. You are not farther away. You are standing on deeper ground. Now, let's gently release something that has been quietly weighing on you. The pressure to feel close to God. This pressure is subtle. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It tells you that prayer should feel a certain way, that worship should move you emotionally, that closeness should be obvious and noticeable, that if you don't feel something, you must not be connected enough. And without realizing it, faith becomes effort. You try harder, you push more, you analyze your spiritual life, you monitor your feelings, you search for signs that God is near, and that pressure slowly steals peace. Here is a quiet truth that can feel freeing when you let it land. God does not require emotional output in order to be present with you. He is not measuring your closeness by how deeply you feel something in prayer. He is not waiting for the right emotion before drawing near. His presence is not activated by intensity. It is rooted in relationship. When you stop trying to feel close to God, something gentle happens. You stop performing. You stop striving. You stop evaluating yourself. And you begin to rest. Rest is where intimacy grows, not the kind of rest that disengages, but the kind that trusts, the kind that stays, the kind that no longer needs proof. You are allowed to come to God without an agenda, without expectations, without emotional requirements, without pressure to experience something. You are allowed to sit with Him in silence, to pray simply, to be honest, to say very little, to feel very little, and still be fully known. Take a slow breath in and let it out gently. If you've been pressuring yourself to feel closer to God, to perform spiritually, to measure your faith by sensation, you can release that now. God is not disappointed in your quiet. He is not distant because you feel numb. He is not withholding Himself. He is with you in the stillness, just as much as He is in the fire. In the next part, we're going to talk about something tender, meeting God where you actually are, not where you think you should be. Stay here. This is not a step backward. It's a step into honesty. Yeah. Now let's talk about something very simple and very holy, meeting God where you actually are, not where you think you should be, not where you used to be, not where you hope to be someday, but where you are right now. This is often the moment people begin to feel relief, because so much spiritual strain comes from trying to meet God from a place we're not standing in. We come pretending we're stronger, calmer, more faithful, more certain, and in doing so, we miss the gentleness of His presence. God does not wait for you to climb out of quiet seasons before He meets you. He does not wait for you to feel warm again. He does not wait for clarity before drawing near. He meets honesty, and honesty sounds like this. God, I don't feel much right now. God, I feel unsure. God, I feel quiet. God, I don't know what this season means. God, I'm here anyway. That kind of prayer is not weak. It is deeply relational. When you bring your real self to God, something soft happens inside you. Your shoulders lower. Your breath slows. Your guard relaxes. Because you are no longer performing closeness. You are simply present. God does not ask you to manufacture feeling in order to be received. He asks you to show up, to be real, to be honest, to be willing, and that is enough. If your spiritual life feels quiet right now, try this gentle shift. Instead of asking, why don't I feel God? Ask, where am I being invited to trust Him without needing to feel? That question changes everything. Take a slow breath in and let it fall out gently. God is not offended by your quiet. He is not threatened by your questions. He is not distant because you feel distant. He is near to you in the honesty of this moment. In the next part, we're going to explore a hopeful truth, how seasons of spiritual distance can become invitations to a deeper kind of closeness. Stay here. This is where meaning begins to form. Now let's gently reframe what this season might actually be, because what you've been calling distance may be an invitation into a quieter faith, a steadier faith, a faith that is no longer fueled by emotion alone, but rooted in trust. Sometimes God allows the familiar sensations to fall away so something deeper can grow. Not to take something from you, but to give something to you. In Scripture, growth often happens in hidden places. Roots deepen underground. Seeds develop in darkness. Strength forms before it is visible, and faith often follows the same pattern. There are seasons where God feels vivid and expressive, and seasons where he feels subtle and still. Both are holy, both are purposeful. If your spiritual life feels quieter right now, it may be because God is teaching your soul how to remain without relying on constant reassurance, how to trust without emotional confirmation, how to stay even when nothing feels dramatic. That kind of faith does not look impressive on the outside, but it is strong. This is where many people turn back too soon. They assume the quiet means something is wrong. They assume the distance means disconnection. They assume the silence means absence. But what if this is where faith matures? What if this is where intimacy deepens? What if God is inviting you into a relationship that no longer depends on feeling him all the time, but knowing him over time? Take a slow breath in and let it fall out gently. You don't need to rush this season. You don't need to force clarity. You don't need to pressure yourself to feel something you're not feeling. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not drifting. You are being invited to trust more deeply than before. This quiet place is not empty. It is fertile, and God is at work here in ways you cannot yet see. In this final part, we're going to seal this understanding with prayer. A prayer not for intensity, but for intimacy. A prayer not for sensation, but for nearness. A prayer for the quiet strength that grows when faith becomes rooted beyond emotion. Stay here. The invitation is gentle. Let's bring everything we've spoken about into prayer. Not a prayer of striving, not a prayer of fixing, but a prayer of rest. God, you see every heart listening right now. You see the quiet places. You see the questions that were never spoken aloud. You see the seasons where faith felt muted and prayer felt different and closeness felt harder to sense. And yet, you have never moved away. God, we release the shame that says distance means failure. We release the pressure to feel something in order to belong. We release the fear that silence means absence, and we receive instead the truth of your nearness. For those who feel spiritually distant, draw near in gentle ways, not with force, not with demand, but with reassurance. Let them know, deep in their spirit, that you are here, that you have not left, that you are not disappointed, that you are not waiting for them to become something else before you love them. Teach them to trust you in quiet seasons, to remain with you without needing proof, to rest in relationship rather than sensation. Let intimacy grow. Where intensity has faded, let roots deepen. Where feelings have softened, let faith mature without pressure. God, meet them where they are, in uncertainty, in stillness, in quiet, in honesty, and let your presence be known, not through emotion, but through peace. Take a slow breath in and let it out gently. May your faith be steady. May your heart be unburdened. May your questions feel safe. May your quiet feel holy. May your relationship with God grow deeper than ever before. You are not distant. You are not forgotten. You are not failing. God is near. Rest now in that truth.